Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of history's most legendary engineering projects. Except this time, you're not just learning about it, you're living it. You're about to become the mastermind behind the Trojan horse. And honestly, you probably won't survive the stress of trying to hide 30 sweaty Greek warriors inside a wooden sculpture while hoping the Trojans don't decide to just burn the whole thing for firewood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global community of history insomniacs. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning sun barely cuts through the smoke of 1,000 cooking fires as you stumble through the Greek encampment outside Troy's walls. Your hands are already stained with yesterday's ink. You've been sketching siege tower improvements that nobody seems interested in after 9 years of failed attempts. The smell of unwashed soldiers mixed with rotting fish from the nearby shore makes your empty stomach churn. You're just another military engineer among dozens, talented but unremarkable, when a messenger grabs your shoulder with enough force to leave bruises. Odysseus wants you now. Your mouth goes dry. The king of Ithaca doesn't summon random engineers unless something's either gone catastrophically wrong or he's cooking up another one of his infamous schemes. You follow the messenger through the maze of tents, past exhausted soldiers sharpening weapons they've sharpened 1,000 times before. Some historians argue this war weariness was the real catalyst for the horse idea. Desperate men make desperate plans. After all, the messenger leads you to a tent that's notably plain for a king's quarters. Inside, Odysseus sits cross-legged on a worn carpet, his clever eyes studying a clay tablet covered in cryptic markings. He doesn't look up when you enter, just gestures for you to sit. The air inside is thick with frankincense, a detail that immediately tells you this meeting is serious enough to invoke the god's attention. "Tell me," he says finally, his voice carrying that unsettling mix of casual friendliness and sharp calculation. "What do you know about sacred offerings?" You mumble something about temple dedications and bronze tripods, but he waves you silent. No, I mean substantial offerings, the kind that could hold significance. His pause on that last word makes your skin prickle, the kind the Trojans couldn't possibly refuse to bring inside their city. That your engineering mind starts racing, but before you can form a coherent thought, he leans forward and speaks the words that will either make you the most famous craftsman in history or get you killed in the most embarrassing way possible. "I need you to build me a horse, a very large, very special horse." The bronze stylus you'd been fidgeting with clatters to the ground. Outside, someone's cooking pot boils over with a harsh hiss. The sound seems prophetic now, like the fates themselves are taking notice. You're about to ask the obvious questions when Odysseus produces a small wooden model from beneath his cloak. It's crude but clear, a hollow horse on wheels, with tiny figures visible through a gap in its belly. "The Trojans worship horses," he continues, watching your face carefully, especially sacred to their Apollo. They'll see this as a peace offering, a admission of defeat. But you and I, he grins, and it's not a pleasant expression. We know better. Your throat feels like you've swallowed sand from the beach. The technical challenges flash through your mind faster than Zeus's lightning: structural integrity, weight ratios, ventilation, acoustics. But the real challenge, the one that makes your palms sweat, is the sheer audacity of it. This isn't just engineering, it's engineering a lie so massive it needs wheels to move. Can you do it? Odysseus asks, though his tone suggests he's already decided you can and will. You nod slowly, already calculating board feet and joint stress, even as part of your mind screams that this is madness. But here's the thing about being an engineer in the Bronze Age. You don't get to choose your projects when kings have ideas. You just try to make sure the math works out and hope the gods have a sense of humor about the whole thing. Odysseus dismisses you with instructions to tell no one, not even your assistant, about the true nature of the project. You stumble out of his tent with your mind reeling, clutching the tiny wooden model like it's made of gold. The morning has grown hotter, and the camp's usual chaos seems surreal now that you're carrying the secret that might end this cursed war. A group of myrmidons jostle past you, arguing about whether Achilles' armor brings bad luck since his death, and you have to bite your tongue to keep from laughing at the irony. They're worried about cursed bronze while you're about to build history's greatest tactical deception. Back in your workshop, really just a commandeered storage tent that reeks of pine resin and bronze shavings, you clear your workbench with shaking hands. The model sits there like an accusation. You've built siege towers that could scratch the clouds, battering rams that could crack mountains. But this is different. This needs to be art and engineering and theater all rolled into one impossible package. You start sketching, your stylus moving across wax tablets with increasing speed. The horse needs to be massive enough to be impressive, but not so large it can't fit through Troy's gates, those famous Scaean gates that you've studied from afar for 9 bitter years. Modern archaeologists still debate their exact dimensions, but you're working with battlefield estimates and the testimony of deserters. Call it 20 cubits high, maybe 15 wide, big enough to hold 30 men if they're friendly with each other. The real challenge hits you like a slap from Athena herself. This thing needs to look like a genuine offering while secretly being a glorified cargo container. Your stylus stops moving. How do you build something that appears solid but is actually hollow? How do you make breathing holes that don't look like breathing holes? How do you create a door that doesn't look like a door? Sir? Your assistant, Pythios, pokes his head into the tent. He's a good kid from Corinth, barely old enough to grow a beard, but clever with numbers. The lumber merchants are here about those catapult repairs. Tell them to wait. You snap, then catch yourself. Can't act suspicious. Actually, Pythios, I need you to do something for me. Go to every lumber merchant in camp. I want an inventory of their finest wood, pine, oak, cedar if they have it. Tell them. You pause, thinking fast. Tell them we're building a victory monument. His eyes light up. Have we won? Is Troy falling? Not yet, you mutter, already back to your sketches. But maybe soon. After he leaves, you allow yourself a moment of pure panic. The wooden model mocks you from the table. You pick it up, turning it over in your hands, noticing details you missed before. Odysseus, or whoever made this, included tiny wheels. Of course, the thing needs to move, which means axles strong enough to support maybe 30 tons of wood, plus the weight of armed men. Bronze Age wheel technology isn't exactly sophisticated. Most carts break down carrying grain, let alone a small building filled with humanity's most dangerous cargo. You grab fresh tablets and start calculating load distributions. If the horse is hollow, most of the weight will be in the outer shell and frame. Pine would be lighter, but oak would be more convincing. The Trojans aren't idiots. They'll expect quality materials for a sacred offering. Cedar would be perfect for the divine symbolism, but good luck finding enough cedar to build a horse that could stable actual horses inside it. A disturbing thought occurs. Ventilation. 30 men breathing in an enclosed wooden space for who knows how many hours. You've seen enough soldiers suffocate in collapsed mine shafts to know that air doesn't just happen, it needs to be designed. But air holes mean potential detection. The Trojans will inspect this gift with the paranoia of people who've survived a 9-year siege. Your mind drifts to a childhood memory, your grandfather showing you how to build bird traps with hidden joints and concealed openings. The best trap, he'd said, is one that looks like shelter. You sketch furiously, adapting those old hunting principles to a massive scale. What if the ventilation is part of the decoration? Carved nostrils that actually function, decorative patterns that hide breathing spaces. Sir, Pythios has returned, looking puzzled. The lumber merchants want to know how much wood you need, and, Menelaus's quartermaster is asking why we're building monuments when we haven't won yet. Perfect. Words already spreading. You grab his shoulder, pulling him close enough to smell the onions he had for breakfast. Listen carefully. Tell anyone who asks that Odysseus commissioned a gift for Athena, a guarantee of our safe voyage home. Make it sound like we're giving up, going home. Understand? He nods, but doubt flickers in his eyes. You're asking him to spread defeatist talk, which usually ends with a spear through the gut. But he's a good soldier. He follows orders even when they make no sense. Alone again. You face the horrible reality. You need to design internal compartments that can hold 30 warriors with their weapons, their armor, their inevitable terror sweat. These aren't just passengers. They're Mycenaean elite warriors who need to emerge fighting ready after hours of immobility. Every detail could mean the difference between victory and the most humiliating military disaster in history. The lumber situation turns into your first major crisis before the sun reaches its peak. Word of your monument has attracted every timber merchant in the Greek camp like flies to honey, but their inventory is pathetic. 9 years of siege warfare has consumed every decent tree within a day's march of Troy. What's left is warped planks rejected for ship repairs, wormy pine that wouldn't support a chicken coop, and scraps that might generously be called firewood. You stand in the middle of the lumber yard, trying not to scream as merchant after merchant shows you wood that would embarrass a beggar's funeral pyre. The horse in your mind, majestic, convincing, structurally sound, feels like a cruel joke compared to the reality of these materials. Traders keep quoting insane prices for their garbage, sensing desperation like sharks smell blood. Perhaps, suggests a Phoenician merchant with gold teeth and calculating eyes. You could use these fine cedar planks, only slightly water damaged from the voyage. You examine his fine cedar and find it riddled with rot. The smell alone would give away your deception. Trojans might be war-weary, but they're not nose-blind. You need fresh wood, quality wood, the kind of timber that suggests divine craftsmanship rather than desperate recycling. Then Pythios, bless his inexperienced heart, mentions something that changes everything. My cousin serves with the Thracian auxiliaries. He says they just finished clearing a grove upstream for their cavalry exercises. Massive oaks, still standing. Your heart pounds. Fresh timber, untouched by the camp's endless appetite for construction material. But Thracian auxiliaries aren't known for their generosity, especially to desperate engineers. You'll need authorization, probably bribes, definitely muscle to haul the logs back. More complications for an already impossible timeline. Get me an audience with their commander, you tell Pythios, and find out which of our men have experience with logging. Real logging, not just chopping firewood. The negotiation with the Thracians takes half the day and most of your personal silver. Their commander, a scarred giant who communicates mainly in grunts and meaningful glares, finds your story about Athena's monument amusing. Greeks and their gods, he spits, but he agrees to let you harvest 20 oaks for a price that would make Croesus wince. What really convinces him is your promise to share credit. Thracian wood for Athena's horse sounds like the kind of thing that might earn divine favor. By late afternoon, you're standing in the grove with 30 conscripted soldiers who claim logging experience. The trees are magnificent, straight-trunked oaks that have been growing since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. Part of you aches at destroying something so ancient for a lie, but war doesn't leave room for tree-hugging sentimentality. We need clean cuts. You instruct the makeshift logging crew. No splitting, no waste. Every cubit of usable wood matters. The first tree takes 2 hours to fell. Your experienced loggers turn out to be mostly liars, though a few actually know which end of an axe to use. The crash when it finally falls shakes the ground and sends birds screaming from neighboring trees. You immediately see problems. The trunk is even thicker than you estimated, which means more weight, but also more material to work with. Historical accounts vary on how long the horse's construction took, but standing here, watching sweating men struggle with bronze axes, you realize those scholars who argue for a rushed job have never tried to process raw timber with Bronze Age tools. Each log needs to be stripped of bark, cut to rough size, and hauled back to camp. The logistics alone make your head spin. We'll need rollers, you mutter, sketching in the dirt. And more men, many more men. Pythios looks worried. Won't that attract attention? If we conscript too many soldiers, people will wonder. He's right, curse him. Everything about this project walks a knife's edge between necessary scale and suspicious activity. You need enough workers to finish quickly, but not so many that the entire camp knows something major is happening. Odysseus wants a secret weapon, not a public works project. A solution presents itself in the form of exhausted soldiers rotating off the front lines. Men who've just spent days staring at Troy's walls are usually given light duties, repairing equipment, maintaining camps. You convince their officers that hauling logs is light duty compared to combat. The fact that you're building Athena's monument helps. Tired soldiers are often suddenly religious. By nightfall, you have your first logs in camp and a crude workshop established away from the main thoroughfare. The wood is beautiful, golden oak that will darken to a rich brown, perfect for a convincing offering. You run your hands over the grain, already seeing where each piece might fit. The horse takes shape in your mind more clearly now, not just as an idea, but as potential locked in these massive trunks. But as you oversee the unloading, a new problem emerges. Several Greek nobles have gathered to gawk at your project, including Menelaus himself. The Spartan king watches with those flat, dangerous eyes as your men struggle with the logs. "So," he says, voice carrying that special Spartan blend of politeness and threat. "Odysseus has you building monuments now? Strange priority when we're still bleeding against their walls." You force yourself to meet his gaze steadily. "The king of Ithaca believes we need divine favor to end this war. My lord, Athena has been distant lately. It's not entirely a lie. The god's favor does seem to have abandoned the Greeks recently." Menelaus grunts, but doesn't press further. Still, his interest is dangerous. Too many eyes on your project means too many chances for someone to notice the odd proportions, the hollow sounds, the fact that you're building a horse large enough to serve as a small barn. Sleep becomes a distant memory as you throw yourself into the calculations that will make or break the entire deception. Your workshop tent glows with oil lamps through the night while you wrestle with the fundamental problem: how to make a hollow horse look solid while incorporating sacred proportions that won't raise Trojan eyebrows. The Greeks might be foreigners to Troy, but religious mathematics is universal. Get the sacred geometry wrong, and even the most war-weary priest will smell a trap. You spread out every text on divine proportions you can beg, borrow, or steal from the camp's scholars. The ratio of height to length needs to follow the golden mean, the same proportions used in temple construction from Egypt to the far north. But here's the maddening part. Those proportions assume solid construction. A hollow horse with the same external dimensions will look subtly wrong, like a man wearing armor made for someone else. "The eye knows," you mutter, adjusting your calculations for the dozenth time. Even if the mind doesn't understand why, the eye knows. Pythios finds you the next morning surrounded by wax tablets covered in geometric proofs, empty wine cups, and what might generously be called breakfast, but looks more like yesterday's bread soaked in olive oil. He's brought a visitor, an old priest of Athena, who serves with the Athenian contingent. The man's milky eyes suggest he's half blind, but his gnarled fingers trace your drawings with surprising accuracy. You're building for the goddess, he wheezes, breath smelling of sacred incense and rotting teeth. The horse must honor her aspects: wisdom, warfare, crafts, three aspects, three proportions unified. You're about to dismiss him as another religious crank when he adds something that makes your stylus freeze mid calculation. The Trojans dedicate horses to Apollo, yes, but their proportions follow Eastern traditions. Longer neck, higher head. Your Greek proportions will mark this as foreign, even if they accept it. Of course, you've been so focused on making it structurally sound and religiously correct by Greek standards that you forgot the Trojans have their own artistic traditions. The horse needs to look like something Greeks would build as an offering, foreign enough to be clearly from the enemy, but familiar enough in its sacred geometry that Trojan priests won't reject it as blasphemous. You spend the day redesigning, incorporating the priest's advice. The neck extends, the head rises higher, the body elongates slightly. But each change cascades through your structural calculations. A longer neck means more weight forward, which means the front wheels need reinforcement, which means the axle placement shifts, which means the internal compartments need reconfiguring. Why does it need to be so precise? Pythios asks, watching you obsess over quarter cubit adjustments. It's not like the Trojans will measure it. You laugh, but it's not a happy sound. They'll do worse. They'll look at it. They'll walk around it. They'll touch it. And if something feels wrong, if the proportions trigger that ancient part of the mind that knows when something's wearing a disguise, they'll burn it on the beach just to be safe. The real challenge comes when you start incorporating the hollow space. The horse's body needs to be a shell around a void large enough for 30 men, but the proportions must remain divine. You solve part of this by making the legs thicker than strictly necessary. Observers will assume it's for structural support of such a massive sculpture, not knowing the real weight is in the warriors hidden inside. Late in the afternoon, a delegation from Agamemnon arrives. The High King wants to know why Odysseus is wasting resources on monuments. You feed them the same story about seeking divine favor for the journey home. But one of them, a sharp-eyed quartermaster, studies your drawings too carefully. Interesting dimensions, he notes. Very generous for a monument, almost like you're planning to fit something inside. Your heart stops, but years of dealing with suspicious officers kicks in. Have you seen Athena's temple in Athens, sir? The goddess appreciates grandeur. Besides, a small offering after 9 years of war would be an insult. He seems satisfied, but the encounter reminds you how many people are watching, calculating, suspicious. Even your own side can't know the truth beyond Odysseus's inner circle. The stress of maintaining the deception while solving impossible engineering problems makes your hands shake when you think no one's looking. That night, you make a breakthrough. Instead of fighting the hollow space, you design around it. The horse becomes, in essence, a wooden building shaped like a horse. The frame is architectural, posts and beams creating a strong skeleton. The skin is shipbuilding, overlapping planks sealed tight. The proportions are theological, sacred geometry applied to a practical lie. You're so excited by the solution that you almost miss the spiritual implications. This horse will be a trinity of Greek crafts, architecture, shipbuilding, and religious art. No wonder historians still argue about who actually built it. The techniques required draw from every major craft tradition of the Bronze Age. But as you refine the design, a new worry gnaws at you. The men inside will need to stay hidden for hours, possibly days. They'll need water, some way to relieve themselves without giving away the game. The interior can't just be an empty box. It needs to be a temporary barracks for the most important military operation in history. The sacred geometry fights you at every turn. Each practical addition, bracing for the men to hold, platforms to distribute weight, sound dampening materials, threatens to throw off the divine proportions. You're not just building a horse anymore, you're building a puzzle where mathematics, theology, and military necessity all have to align perfectly. The bronze saw screams against oak like a dying harpy, showering you with sawdust that sticks to your sweat-soaked skin. It's been 3 days since you started actual construction, and already you want to strangle whoever invented Bronze Age tools. Your hands are a mess of blisters and splinters, and that's just from directing the work. The actual craftsmen look like they've been mauled by very precise bears. The blade's dulling again, complains Alexios, your best carpenter. He's a shipwright from Pylos, who knows wood like a lover, but even he's struggling with the scale. At this rate, we'll need all the bronze in camp just to keep our tools sharp. He's not exaggerating by much. Bronze is softer than the iron tools that some barbarian tribes supposedly use up north, and oak is harder than Agamemnon's heart. Every cut requires multiple passes, frequent sharpening, and colorful cursing that would make Poseidon blush. You've already sent Pythios to beg, borrow, or steal every whetstone in camp. The fundamental problem is that you're trying to achieve furniture quality joinery on architectural scales with tools designed for rough work. The horse can't just be big, it needs to be convincing. That means smooth surfaces, tight joints, and details that will survive Trojan inspection, but your tools want to make rough cuts and crude connections. What if, suggests a voice behind you, we think less like carpenters and more like sculptors? You turn to find Miklos, an artist turned soldier who's been conscripted for detail work. He's holding a collection of small chisels and scrapers that look almost delicate compared to your construction tools. Stone carvers face similar problems, achieving fine detail on large scales. We use different tools for different stages. It's brilliant and obvious in hindsight. You reorganize the workflow, rough cutting with the big saws, shaping with medium tools, finishing with fine implements. It triples the work time, but produces results that actually look divine rather than desperate. The question is whether you have enough time and tools to implement this approach across the entire horse. Innovation becomes your daily bread. When traditional augers prove too slow for drilling the dozens of hidden air holes, you adapt a technique from siege warfare, heating bronze rods and burning through the wood. It's faster and creates naturally tapered holes that look decorative rather than functional. When standard joints prove too weak for the scale, you remember an old shipbuilding trick using wedged dovetails that lock tighter under pressure. but each solution creates new problems. The heated rods produce smoke that announces your position to anyone downwind. The complex joints require precision cutting that eats through bronze blades like a glutton through a feast. You find yourself raiding other workshops, trading favors and promises for tools you might use once before they break. We need more scrapers, Alexios announces midway through the fourth day. The surface finishing is destroying them faster than we can sharpen. You've already borrowed tools from half the camp's craftsmen. Any more requisitions, and people will start asking why Athena's monument requires enough equipment to build a fleet. But smooth surfaces aren't negotiable. Rough wood suggests hasty construction, and hasty construction suggests deception. Then Pythios, wonderful Pythios, mentions his uncle, the pottery maker. He uses these shells from some special beach near Corinth. They're harder than bronze for scraping clay. Within hours, you've traded a month's wine ration for a bag of shells that would make Aphrodite jealous. They work beautifully on wood, creating surfaces so smooth they almost glow. It's the kind of random discovery that makes you believe the gods might actually want this insane plan to succeed. The real breakthrough comes from frustration. You're trying to create decorative panels that will hide the main entry hatch when one of your workers, drunk on exhaustion and watered wine, suggests using ship caulking techniques. If it keeps water out, he slurs, it'll keep air in or out or whatever you need. He's accidentally brilliant. Ship caulking uses layered materials, pitch, fabric, more pitch, to create flexible seals. Applied to your hidden doors, it can create nearly invisible joints that will still open when needed. You modify the technique, using horsehair, ironically enough, mixed with pine resin to create seals that look like decorative elements. Days blur together in a haze of sawdust and solutions. You develop a hollow chisel for removing material from tight spaces. You create jigs for consistent curved cuts. You even invent a primitive but effective system of pulleys for test-fitting massive pieces without killing your workers. Each innovation feels like a small victory against the limitations of your tools and materials. But the cost is becoming visible. Your workforce looks like walking wounded, bandaged hands, sawdust-filled eyes, backs bent from hunching over precise work. The bronze tools are disappearing faster than Odysseus's patience, worn down to nubs or broken beyond repair. You're burning through resources like a forest fire, and people are starting to notice. The smiths are asking questions, Miklos reports. They want to know why we need so many replacement blades. Some are joking that we're arming the horse itself. If only they knew how close to the truth their joke lands. You deflect with talk of oak's hardness, of divine perfection requiring perfect tools, but you know the gossip mill is churning. Too many people are involved now. Too many hands have touched the work. The secret feels fragile as a butterfly's wing. Still, you push forward, driven by a mixture of fear and fascination. Each problem solved reveals new challenges. Each innovation opens new possibilities. You're not just building anymore, you're inventing an entirely new craft, one that exists in the intersection of architecture, engineering, and military deception. Future historians will puzzle over the techniques, not realizing they were born from desperation and Bronze Age stubbornness. The mathematics of deception keep you awake for the fifth straight night. You're hunched over a full-scale chalk drawing on a flat piece of ground, trying to solve a problem that would make Archimedes weep. The horse needs wheels strong enough to carry 30 tons of wood and warriors, but those wheels need to look proportional to a religious offering, not a siege engine. Every calculation splits into three concerns. Will it hold? Will it roll? And will it look innocent? Pythios brings you breakfast, if you can call stale bread and olives breakfast, while you mutter over axle placement. The front wheels take 60% of the load when stationary, you explain to him, mostly because saying it aloud helps you think. But when it's being pulled, the force distribution changes, and if the men inside shift position, maybe they shouldn't move, he suggests hopefully. You laugh, but it sounds more like a cough. Tell 30 warriors to stay perfectly still for hours while Trojans debate whether to burn them alive. See how that goes. The wheel problem compounds because you can't use standard cartwheels. Those are designed for rough functionality, not divine aesthetics. The horse's wheels need to seem ceremonial, decorated, perhaps even gilded, while actually being the strongest weight-bearing structures you've ever designed. It's like asking someone to build a battering ram that looks like a flower arrangement. You finally settle on a hybrid design. Massive oak cores for strength, overlaid with thinner decorative panels that hide the functional ugliness. The spokes will be twice as thick as normal, but carved to create shadow patterns that disguise their bulk. It's carpentry as illusion, engineering as sleight of hand. The real nightmare begins when you start calculating the internal weight distribution. 30 warriors in bronze armor aren't just heavy, they're unpredictably heavy. They'll shift, breathe, probably panic. Your horse needs to remain stable, whether they're perfectly distributed or all crowded to one side, trying to peer through air holes. Build platforms, suggests Alexios when you share the problem. Like a ship's rowing benches, but for standing. It's a good start, but not enough. You design a complex internal frame that serves triple duty, structural support for the shell, platforms for the men, and weight distribution through triangulated bracing. Historians often wonder why Greek engineering advanced so rapidly after the war. They don't realize it's because problems like this forced innovation at sword point. The seventh day brings a near disaster. You're testing weight calculations using sandbags when one of the prototype wheels splits with a sound like Zeus's own thunder. The axle, thick as a man's waist, shows stress fractures that make your blood run cold. If this had happened with men inside, in front of Troy's gates, double the axles, Miklos suggests, but you shake your head. Too obvious. Trojans will wonder why a religious statue needs siege engine reinforcement. The solution comes from shipbuilding again, laminated wood, layers bound with hide glue, and bronze bands hidden under decorative elements. It's stronger than solid wood, but requires techniques your workers have never attempted. You spend an entire day teaching them how to create curved laminations using heated sand and steady pressure. Meanwhile, Odysseus visits to check progress. He studies your latest design drawings with those clever eyes that miss nothing. The priests will examine it. He reminds you unnecessarily. They'll look for signs of Greek craftsmanship to verify it's genuine. I've added dedication plaques. You show him bronze panels with prayers to Athena, but Lord, you hesitate, then plunge ahead. The weight calculations assume your men can stay calm. If they panic, if they crowd together, they won't, he says with flat certainty. I'll choose men who've proven themselves in tight spaces, tunnel fighters, ship raiders, men who can breathe darkness without screaming. Easy for him to say. He won't be calculating load dynamics for human cargo that might suddenly decide the plan is insane and try to escape. You add extra reinforcement anyway, hidden in places that will look like religious decoration. Better to over-engineer than under-deliver when failure means becoming history's greatest fool. The weight distribution problems multiply when you factor in weapons and armor. Each man needs his full kit: sword, spear, shield, helmet. But that's another talent of bronze per warrior. The total load approaches something you'd normally move with a team of oxen and proper siege equipment, not ceremonial wheels designed to look pretty. What if they leave some equipment behind? Pythios suggests. Take only essential weapons? You and Alexios exchange looks. Would you enter enemy territory without your full armor? Alexios asks, knowing you're about to fight your way through their entire city. The boy pales, understanding. These aren't just passengers. They're an assault force that needs to emerge combat ready. Every ounce of equipment could mean the difference between taking Troy's gates and dying in its streets. You can't compromise their effectiveness for your convenience. So you innovate again. Weapon racks built into the structural frame, doubling as bracing, shields hung on pivot points that distribute their weight evenly. Even the men's positions are calculated. Taller warriors in spots that can handle more weight, shorter ones where headroom is limited. It's human Tetris with lethal stakes. Testing continues with increasingly realistic loads. Sandbags give way to volunteers in full armor, standing on the platforms while others pull the prototype frame. You discover that rhythmic swaying, inevitable when moving, creates harmonic stresses you hadn't calculated. Back to the drawing board, adding diagonal braces that look like decorative elements but actually prevent catastrophic resonance. By the 8th night, you've solved most of the weight distribution issues through what can only be called mathematical brutality. Every beam, every joint, every wheel spoke has been calculated and recalculated until the numbers blur together. The horse that exists in your plans could carry 50 men safely. You're building for 30, with margins that would make a Persian architect jealous. But as you finally allow yourself a moment of satisfaction, Odysseus returns with news that makes your stomach drop. The Trojans have reinforced their gates. Our spies report they've added an additional crossbeam. The maximum height is now 18 cubits, not 20. 2 cubits, just 6 feet. But it means redesigning the entire upper structure, recalculating every load, adjusting every proportion. You stare at your plans, seeing weeks of work that need to be redone in days. The numbers swim before your exhausted eyes, mocking your careful calculations. Can it be done? Odysseus asks. You're already grabbing fresh tablets, mind racing through the implications. Lower height means redistributed weight, adjusted wheel ratios, modified and internal platforms. It's not impossible, just another layer of complexity on an already impossible task. Give me 2 days, you hear yourself say, though part of you wonders if you'll survive them. The internal compartments are where engineering meets nightmare. You're essentially designing a wooden submarine that operates on land, and every decision could mean suffocation, discovery, or both. The scaled down height makes everything worse. Less space means tighter quarters, which means greater chance of panic, which means more ingenious solutions needed to keep 30 warriors from murdering each other before they even reach Troy. You start with the basics. Air. Men breathe more when they're terrified, and nothing says terror like being sealed in a wooden horse while enemies debate whether to burn you alive. Your calculations show you need roughly 40 small holes for adequate ventilation, but 40 holes might as well be 40 signs reading, "Greeks inside, please stab." What about the main? Miklos suggests one morning, artistic mind seeing what your engineer's brain missed. Carved properly, flowing hair could hide dozens of openings. It's brilliant. You redesign the mane as an elaborate carved cascade, each curl and whirl concealing small, breathing holes. From the outside, it looks like obsessive artistic detail. From inside, it's the difference between a clever trap and a mass grave. The tail gets similar treatment, decorative braiding that's actually functional ventilation, but air is just the start. The men need platforms to stand on, handholds to grip during movement, and this is the part that makes you question your sanity, some way to relieve themselves during what could be a day-long wait. You can't exactly install a latrine in a religious offering. The solution is disturbingly practical. Sealed clay jars with tight-fitting lids, secured in the lowest part of the horse. It's not dignified, but neither is dying because someone couldn't hold it and the smell gave you away. You design special brackets to hold them stable during movement, because the only thing worse than the arrangement is having it spill. The platforms need padding, notes Alexios, after watching volunteers stand in position for just an hour. Their legs are already cramping, but padding means thickness. Thickness means less space. Less space means you're trapped in an ever-shrinking puzzle where every comfort costs precious inches. Finally, you settle on woven reed mats, thin but cushioning, and they can be rolled up if more space is suddenly needed. The seventh day of construction brings Diomedes, one of the Greeks' best warriors, to inspect your progress. He's been chosen to lead the horse party, and his first question nearly stops your heart. What happens if we need to get out quickly? You've been so focused on concealment that emergency exit hasn't been a primary concern. But he's right. If discovered, 30 men need to exit fast enough to fight, not funnel out one by one like sheep to slaughter. You spend the entire night redesigning the main hatch to open in segments, allowing multiple men to drop out simultaneously. Testing the compartments requires volunteers, and most soldiers suddenly develop religious obligations elsewhere when asked to be sealed inside a wooden prototype. Finally, Odysseus sends his own picked men Scarred veterans who've survived everything from cave ambushes to ship boarding. They climb inside with the casual air of menhood who've faced worse. Within minutes, problems emerge. Can't see anything, one complains. How do we know when to come out? Too hot, another adds. Feels like a bread oven in here. This beam's right where my spear needs to go, a third points out. Can't draw properly. Each complaint requires redesign. You add small observation slits disguised as decorative inlay. You create convection channels that use the horse's height to draw cooler air up from below. You reconfigure weapon storage to allow for quick draws while maintaining structural integrity. Every solution feels like threading a needle while wearing bronze gauntlets. The acoustic challenges nearly break you. Wood resonates. 30 men in bronze armor resonate louder. During movement tests, the prototype sounds like a giant rattle full of very angry beans. The Trojans might be war-weary, but they're not deaf. You need the horse to sound solid, not like the world's worst maraca. Fabric, suggests the old priest who's been haunting your construction site. The temples use it to muffle echo, thick wool, properly placed. You want to kiss his wrinkled forehead, wool panels, dyed to look like decorative backing, line the interior walls. They'll muffle sound while also providing something softer than oak for terrified warriors to lean against. It's another layer of complexity. The fabric needs to be fire resistant in case the Trojans test with torches, but it works. Days blur together as you refine the human machinery inside your wooden beast. Handholds placed at exact intervals for stability during movement. Platforms with lips to prevent feet from sliding. Even a primitive communication system, knotted ropes the men can pull to signal basic messages without speaking. It's like a ship, one of the test volunteers observes. A very small, very dark ship that doesn't go anywhere nice. He's not wrong. The skills needed to survive inside the horse are more naval than military. You find yourself consulting with sailors about how they manage long watches in cramped holds. Their advice is depressingly practical. Pick men who don't panic in tight spaces. Establish a clear hierarchy to prevent arguments, and pray to whatever gods might be listening. The final design is a marvel of hidden functionality. From outside, the horse looks solid, decorative, divine. Inside, it's a carefully orchestrated machine for delivering humans to history. Every surface serves double duty. Every space is maximized. Every potential problem has 3 backup solutions. But standing inside the finished compartment, even knowing every measurement and stress calculation, you feel the walls pressing in. The darkness is absolute once the hatches close. The air, while adequate, tastes of wood and fear. You last 5 minutes before scrambling out, gasping like a landed fish. I couldn't do it. You admit to Odysseus that night. Knowing it's safe isn't the same as feeling safe. Your men, my men are warriors. He cuts you off. They've hidden in worse places for worse reasons. They'll manage. The acoustic nightmare reaches critical mass on the 10th day when Odysseus brings his hand-picked warriors for a full rehearsal. 30 of Greece's finest killers squeeze into your wooden masterpiece, and within minutes, The horse sounds like a percussion ensemble warming up during an earthquake. Every shift produces creaks, every breath echoes, every piece of bronze armor finds another piece to clang against. It's not a Trojan horse, it's a Trojan alarm bell. This won't work, Diomedes states flatly, his voice muffled from inside. We sound like a smith's shop falling down a mountain. You're already scribbling solutions, mind racing through materials and methods. The wool helps with voices, but does nothing for metal on metal contact. The warriors can't remove their armor. Emerging unprotected would be suicide. Somehow, you need to make 30 bronze-clad soldiers sound like empty wood. Leather, Pythios suggests. Wrap the armor joints? It's a start, but not enough. You need comprehensive sound dampening that doesn't restrict movement or combat readiness. The solution comes from an unexpected source, a sailor who mentions how they silence cargo in storms. Pitch-covered rope, he explains, winds around everything, grips tight, kills the rattle. You adapt the concept, creating leather-wrapped rope systems that secure armor pieces without binding them. It's painstaking work. Each warrior needs individual fitting. Every piece of equipment needs its own silencing solution. Swords get leather piece bonds that can be cut quickly. Shields receive backing that prevents them from becoming drums. Even the men's sandals get cloth wrapping to muffle footsteps on the platforms. But the real acoustic revelation comes during a failed test. One warrior, frustrated by the heat and confinement, starts breathing in a controlled pattern, the meditation technique some Eastern mercenaries use. His section of the horse goes eerily quiet, bronze armor seemingly weightless. You realize it's not just about silencing equipment, it's about teaching the men to move like ghosts. We need a movement doctrine. You tell Diomedes, specific techniques for shifting position without sound. He looks at you like you've suggested teaching wolves to use silverware. These are warriors, not dancers. Inside that horse, they need to be both. What follows is possibly the strangest military training in history. You bring in dancers from the camp followers, much to the warrior's initial horror, to teach principles of controlled movement. The men learn to shift weight gradually, to breathe with their whole bodies, to treat their armor like an extension of their skin rather than noisy metal shells. The dancers find it hilarious. Big, strong warriors learning to tiptoe, one laughs, demonstrating how to pivot without letting bronze greaves click together. But by the third day of acoustic training, even Diomedes admits the difference is dramatic. The horse no longer sounds like it's giving birth to a bronze foundry. Testing reveals more problems. During the transport phase, the horse will experience rhythmic swaying. This creates predictable motion that the men can brace against, except when it doesn't. Sudden stops, turns, or bumps in the road send warriors stumbling into each other with catastrophic noise. You need a system that maintains silence through unpredictable movement. The solution is elegantly simple: ship's hammocks, adapted for standing men. Each warrior gets a leather harness connected to the frame by silent rope systems. They can sway with the motion instead of fighting it, reducing both noise and exhaustion. It looks ridiculous, grown killers hanging like sides of beef, but it works. What about coughing? Asks one warrior during testing, or sneezing, can't control those. You've thought of this. Each man gets a thick leather pad, treated with beeswax, that can muffle involuntary sounds. It's not perfect, but it's better than naked noise. You also design hand signals visible in the minimal light from the air holes, allowing silent communication for basic needs. The acoustic modifications create new structural challenges. All that leather and rope adds weight, not much per man, but multiplied by 30, it's significant. You're constantly recalculating, adjusting support beams by finger widths to accommodate each new addition. The horse is becoming less construction project and more living organism, growing and adapting to its purpose. Then comes the worst test: complete silence for 6 hours. The men climb inside at dawn, and you seal them in with orders to remain mission ready but silent until noon. The first hour goes well. The second brings minor shuffling. By the third, you can hear suppressed coughs, shifted weight, the subtle sounds of men fighting their own bodies. It's the stillness that kills you, one warrior explains after emerging. In battle, you're moving, focused. In there, your mind starts eating itself. Every itch becomes torture. Every breath sounds like a roar. You add mental occupation to your design, small counting beads the men can manipulate silently, patterns carved into handholds that fingers can trace. It's psychological engineering, giving restless minds something to do besides panic. Some warriors mock these additions as comfort toys, but those same mockers clutch them like talismans during the next test. The final acoustic innovation comes from Odysseus himself. Music, he says simply. During the transport, have musicians playing, drums, loud songs. Let the Trojans think we're celebrating our departure. Any small sounds from inside will be covered. It's brilliant in its simplicity. You design the procession, placement of musicians, types of instruments, even specific songs known to cover certain frequency ranges. The horse won't need to be perfectly silent, just quieter than the celebration around it. You even add bronze decorations that will chime in the wind, providing natural cover for any internal sounds. By the end of the acoustic phase, your horse has evolved into something unrecognizable from the original design. It's a sound trap, a mobile recording studio in reverse, engineered to swallow noise rather than produce it. The warriors who emerge after 8-hour tests look haggard but triumphant. They've proven it can be done. But you know the real test will come with Trojan ears listening, Trojan hands examining, Trojan spears potentially probing for exactly the sounds you've worked so hard to eliminate. Every solution creates new vulnerabilities. Every innovation opens new ways to fail. The acoustic engineering is brilliant, but brilliance and success are distant cousins in war. Standing inside the finished compartment during a full silence test, you experience something profound. 30 armed men surround you, yet the darkness swallows even their breathing. It's like being inside Hades' own throat, waiting to be swallowed or spat out. The horse has become more than wood and bronze. It's a meditation on sound itself, a prayer to silence wrapped in oak and deception. Religious symbolism becomes your next battlefield, and it's somehow more treacherous than weight distribution or acoustics. The horse can't just be large and functional. It needs to radiate divine purpose so strongly that even paranoid Trojan priests will feel guilty about questioning it. You're not just building a structure anymore, you're crafting a theological argument in wood and bronze. The head poses the first major challenge. It needs to look noble enough for a god's steed, but incorporate all your hidden ventilation without seeming hollow. You spend days studying actual horses, noting how their nostrils flare, how their eyes sit, where shadows naturally fall. The irony isn't lost on you, learning to carve a convincing horse while building history's least honest one. The eyes need to be perfect, insists the old priest who's appointed himself your theological advisor. Windows to the soul, get them wrong, and the whole animal feels dead. And you experiment with different materials. Polished bronze gives an unsettling metallic stare. Painted wood looks cheap. Plain carved eyes seem blind. Finally, Miklos suggests inlaid obsidian surrounded by silver. It's expensive enough to make Agamemnon weep, but the effect is stunning. The horse's eyes seem to follow viewers, alive with divine intelligence that definitely isn't 30 terrified Greeks. The dedication plaques require even more careful thought. They need to establish the horse as a genuine offering while subtly encouraging the Trojans to bring it inside. You draft dozens of versions with the priest, each walking the line between piety and manipulation. For Athena, guardian of travelers, we dedicate this steed. May it bring peace where war has dwelt. May its presence bless those who honor the gods. It's vague enough to support multiple interpretations, but specific enough to seem genuine. The priest insists on adding traditional formulas in archaic Greek, the kind of thing a desperate army might include to ensure divine favor. You have the words carved by your best craftsmen, each letter deep enough to catch shadow and hold attention. But the real masterstroke comes when you remember Trojan horse worship traditions. Their sacred horses are always decorated with specific symbols: solar discs for Apollo, grain sheaves for Demeter, waves for Poseidon. You can't use Trojan symbols directly. That would be obvious forgery. Instead, you create a fusion, Greek interpretations of universal divine concepts that Trojans will recognize but not reject. Clever. Odysseus approves when you show him the design, foreign but familiar, like hearing your own language with an accent. The carpentry required for religious decoration pushes your workers to their limits. Sacred geometry demands precision. A spiral that slightly off looks worse than no spiral at all. You create templates from bronze sheet, guides that ensure every repeated pattern matches perfectly. The men grumble about the detail work, but even they admit the emerging decorations look genuinely divine. Then comes the question of materials. A true offering to Athena would include precious metals, ivory, rare woods. But you're building with war camp resources, and every piece of gold spent on decoration is food not bought for soldiers. You need to create the impression of wealth without the reality. Gilding, suggests the camp's premier shield maker, thin as breath, but it catches light like solid gold. You've never worked with gold leaf. It's usually reserved for temple statues and royal armor, but he teaches you the technique, Gold beaten thinner than papyrus, applied with honey-based adhesive, burnished until it seems to glow from within. A tiny amount covers surprising area, transforming plain wood into something luminous. The challenge is applying it to a siege weapon while making it look like artistic choice. You gild the high points, the main's tips, the eye's surroundings, strategic spots on the legs where light naturally catches. From a distance, the horse seems to shimmer with divine approval. Up close, it's clear the Greeks couldn't afford to gild everything, which paradoxically makes it more believable. Desperate offerings often mix grandeur with poverty. The priest observes, the Trojans will recognize the pattern, rich enough to show respect, poor enough to show sincerity. You also need to incorporate wear patterns that suggest the horse was built over time with devotion, not thrown together in 2 weeks by exhausted engineers. You have workers randomly vary their carving pressure to create natural inconsistencies. Some decorative elements are intentionally left slightly unfinished, as if the Greeks ran out of time, which isn't far from the truth. The religious symbolism extends to proportions you've already established. The priest insists certain measurements align with sacred numbers, 7 panels on the belly, 9 decorative bands on the legs, 12 rosettes around the neck. Each requirement forces adjustments to your structural design, but you're past complaining. At this point, adding mystical mathematics to your engineering nightmare seems almost quaint. Color becomes another theological battleground. The horse needs paint. Raw wood doesn't suit divine offerings, but which colors? In what patterns? Greek tradition favors certain combinations, but you need something that speaks to universal religious feeling. After much debate and several heated arguments that nearly turn violent, you settle on deep red for blood and wine, white for purity and divine favor, and touches of blue for the sea that brought the Greeks here. The painting process reveals yet another challenge. Your pine resin-based paints dry differently on different woods, creating uneven coloration that makes the horse look diseased rather than divine. You spend 3 days experimenting with undercoats and sealers, finally achieving consistent color that enhances rather than distracts from the carving. It needs imperfection, Miklos argues during final decoration. Too perfect, and it looks inhuman. The gods appreciate effort, not just results. He's right. You deliberately include small flaws, a slightly misaligned rosette here, a carving that doesn't quite match its partner there. They're calculated imperfections, carefully placed to suggest human devotion rather than divine manifestation. It's yet another layer of deception, using honesty about craftsmanship to hide dishonesty about purpose. The final religious touch comes from Odysseus. Include offerings inside the decoration, weapons hung as trophies, personal items sacrificed for divine favor. Make it clear we're giving up precious things for safe passage home. You create special mounting points disguised as decorative elements. The Greeks contribute convincingly precious items, a silver cup here, a decorated sword there, enough to suggest genuine sacrifice without actually losing anything irreplaceable. Each piece is mounted to be easily removable, because waste not, want not, even in legendary deception. Standing back to view the completed religious elements, you feel a strange mix of pride and unease. The horse radiates divine purpose from every angle, a masterwork of theological engineering. It's beautiful enough to make priests weep and convincing enough to make skeptics doubt their doubts. You've created not just a hiding place, but a proper offering, one that happens to be stuffed with Greece's most dangerous killers. The construction crew management becomes its own special hell as the project enters its third week. You're juggling 47 workers with various skills, 15 borrowed specialists, and a rotating cast of helpers who are mostly spies from other Greek factions trying to figure out what Odysseus is planning. Every morning brings new faces who've been assigned to assist with Athena's monument, and in every evening you have to figure out which ones are too curious to keep around. That one's definitely reporting to Menelaus, Alexios mutters, nodding toward a supposedly innocent carpenter who keeps measuring things he has no reason to measure. And the Myrmidon over there hasn't touched a tool all day, just watches and remembers. You've developed an elaborate system of misdirection. The actual horse construction happens in the main area where everyone can see. Nothing suspicious about building what you claim to be building. But the critical modifications happen during night shifts with only your most trusted workers. Men who've sworn oaths to Odysseus that would make their hair turn white to break. The security becomes more critical as the horse takes shape. What started as an obvious construction project transforms day by day into something magnificent and deeply unsettling. Workers who aren't in on the secret start making nervous jokes about the horse looking too alive or hungry somehow. One superstitious Locrian refuses to work on the head after claiming the obsidian eyes watched him. Maybe we should let him spread that story. You tell Odysseus during one of his inspection visits, divine unease might help sell the illusion. He agrees, and soon carefully crafted rumors circulate through camp. The horse's wood came from a sacred grove. True, if you consider all groves sacred to someone. Strange sounds emerge from it at night. Also true, you're testing acoustic dampening. Workers report dreams of horses galloping through clouds, completely fabricated, but who checks dreams? Managing the workforce while maintaining secrecy requires skills you never learned in engineering. You develop different crews for different aspects, woodworkers who only see their section, painters who arrive after structural work is complete, detail carvers who never glimpse the hollow interior. It's like building a puzzle where none of the workers can see the box lid. The borrowed specialists are the worst. The goldsmith who applies gilding asks too many questions about weight distribution. The bronze caster wonders aloud why a religious statue needs such robust internal bracing. The master painter notices that certain decorative panels seem designed to open. Each observation requires careful deflection, logical explanation, or sudden reassignment to another part of camp. Why does the belly need reinforcement there? Asks a sharp-eyed shipwright. That's not a stress point for a solid statue. Ah, you explain smoothly, but consider the symbolic weight. This area represents Athena's burden of wisdom. The priests insisted on additional strength to honor that metaphysical load. He looks skeptical, but nods. You've learned that adding religious babble to technical explanations makes most Greeks stop asking questions. Nobody wants to appear impious by challenging theological engineering. Labor disputes arise daily. Skilled craftsmen resent taking orders from you. A mere siege engineer suddenly elevated to chief architect of a divine offering. The borrowed workers complain about the brutal pace. Everyone wants more wine rations, better food, fewer night shifts. You handle each complaint with a mixture of bribery, threats, and appeals to patriotic duty. Think of the stories you'll tell. You remind a grumbling work crew. You built the offering that convinced the gods to end this war. Your grandchildren will beg to hear about every carved detail. What you don't mention is that those stories better not include certain architectural features, or those grandchildren might be hearing them through prison bars. The real challenge comes when different crews what needs to integrate. The team building internal platforms can't coordinate with the external carvers without revealing why platforms exist. The painters need to work around ventilation holes that officially don't exist. The bronze workers adding reinforcement can't explain why a statue needs siege engine grade axles. You spend half your time running interference, creating plausible reasons for impossible requirements. Pythios becomes invaluable as your information manager. He maintains multiple sets of plans, real ones for trusted workers, edited ones for general crews, and completely fabricated ones for the curious. He develops a genius for appearing right when someone's about to discover something problematic, always with an urgent task that requires their immediate attention elsewhere. Diomedes needs you to check the assembly, he'll say, pulling a worker away from examining the too convenient handholds inside the belly, or the wood shipment arrived wrong. Need your expertise at the storage area when someone spends too long studying the hidden door mechanisms. Worker safety becomes another headache. Building at this scale with Bronze Age equipment means daily injuries, crushed fingers, saw cuts, falls from scaffolding. Your medical supplies dwindle as fast as your patients. But injured workers talk, especially when wine dulls their pain. So you establish a separate recovery area where the wounded can't spread dangerous observations. The closest call comes when a painter falls through what he thinks is solid flooring, but is actually the concealed entry hatch. He lands inside the hidden compartment, sees the platforms and weapon racks, and starts screaming about demons preparing to possess the horse. Quick thinking by Alexios, who claims the man hit his head and is hallucinating, combined with enough wine to float a trireme, keeps the story from spreading. But you don't sleep that night, wondering who else might have noticed the painter's oddly specific delusions. As the horse nears completion, managing the workers becomes less about construction and more about controlling information. You implement a gradual dismissal process. Crews finish their sections and are reassigned to other projects across camp. By the time the final details are added, only your core team remains, men whose loyalty has been tested and proven. It's beautiful, admits even the skeptical shipwright on his last day. Whatever its true purpose, you've created something extraordinary, and you thank him while mentally cataloging how much he knows, whether he's a security risk, if his accidental assignment to a forward patrol unit needs to become more permanent. The stress of juggling construction and conspiracy has turned you into someone you barely recognize, part engineer, part spy master, part theatrical director, managing the greatest deception in history. The final crew meeting happens the night before the horse's official completion. Your trusted workers gather in the workshop, faces lit by oil lamps that make everyone look like conspirators, which, you suppose, they are. You thank them for their skill, their discretion, their willingness to build something that defies easy explanation. Then Odysseus himself appears, distributing gold that ensures their continued silence more effectively than any oath. The final assembly arrives like a tsunami you've been watching approach for weeks, inevitable, terrifying, and guaranteed to destroy everything if you've miscalculated. The horse exists in carefully crafted sections around the workshop, each piece a masterwork of deception waiting to become part of the whole. Now you have to assemble this puzzle while maintaining the fiction that it's just a very large statue and definitely not history's most audacious military hardware. The morning starts with Agamemnon himself arriving to observe. The High King has finally noticed that Odysseus's monument is consuming resources like a campaign, and his accountants are asking pointed questions. He stands in your workshop, surrounded by bodyguards, examining pieces with the eye of someone who's commissioned plenty of monuments to his own glory. Impressive, he admits grudgingly, running his hand along a gilded section of mane, though I question the expense. This gold could have bought us another month of supplies. My lord, Odysseus interjects smoothly, what price can we place on divine favor? We've tried everything else. Perhaps Athena waits for proper recognition of her wisdom. You stay silent, focusing on directing the initial assembly. The base goes together first, the wheeled platform that needs to look ceremonial while actually supporting more weight than any normal monument. Your workers move with practiced efficiency, but you can see the strain. They know what they're really building now, and that knowledge makes every joint seem to scream its true purpose. The legs prove nightmarish to attach. Each one is a hollow column that needs to appear solid, connect perfectly with the base, and support tremendous downward force. The joinery you've designed is revolutionary, a combination of shipbuilding techniques and architectural principles that won't be invented for centuries. But innovation born from desperation rarely gets recorded in history books. Steady, steady, you shout as the front left leg swings into position. 20 men strain with ropes and poles, guiding the massive timber precisely. The mortise and tenon joint needs to align within a finger's width, or the whole structure becomes unstable. Sweat pours down faces despite the cool morning air. One slip and tons of oak become very expensive kindling. The joint slides home with a sound like thunder. Bronze pins, thick as spear shafts, lock it in place, one leg attached, 3 to go. You're already exhausted, and the sun has barely climbed above the horizon. Why does a monument need such robust construction? Agamemnon asks, too casually. Surely the gods appreciate craftsmanship over mere mass. The journey to Athena's temple will be long, my lord. You explain, the lie rolling smoothly off your tongue after so much practice. Through rough terrain, possibly storms, we build not just for presentation, but for arrival. It would be impious to offer the goddess a gift that falls apart in transit. He seems satisfied, but his accountant, a rat-faced Argive who counts coppers like some men count lovers, continues making notes. You'll need to ensure your false expense records match whatever story Odysseus has prepared. The body assembly requires the crane system you've improvised from shiploading equipment. The hollow shell, carefully braced inside but appearing solid from without, weighs enough to make the ropes creak ominously. You guide it with hand signals developed over countless practice runs, but your heart doesn't stop racing until it settles perfectly onto the leg assembly. Beautiful, murmurs Miklos, and he's not wrong, even incomplete. The horse radiates power and purpose. The proportions you've fought so hard to maintain create an optical illusion. It seems to be straining forward, eager to run, despite being wooden and stationary. The head attachment requires delicate work. This is where all your hidden ventilation comes together, where the obsidian eyes need to align perfectly with the internal sight lines, where the smallest mistake will be most visible. You trust only Alexios and yourself for this, everyone else reduced to support roles. Higher on the left, you instruct, guiding the head into position. Now back. Careful. There. The connection points mesh like lovers reuniting. Bronze bolts secure it from inside, another innovation that allows assembly without visible fasteners. From outside, the horse appears carved from a single, impossible tree. But time is your enemy now. Agamemnon's presence has drawn other commanders, curious about this expense Odysseus has somehow justified. Menelaus arrives with his perpetual scowl. Diomedes appears, ostensibly to check on his men, but really to assess the horse that will carry them. Ajax the Lesser makes crude jokes about the horse's anatomy that hit uncomfortably close to certain hidden features. We should test the wheels, suggests someone. You're too focused to identify the voice. Ensure it moves properly for the ceremony. Your blood freezes. Moving the horse now, partially assembled, risks revealing every engineering compromise, but refusing would be suspicious. You nod to your team, praying to whatever gods might still favor lying Greeks. The test is agonizing. The horse rolls forward, guided by 30 men with ropes. Every rotation of the wheels sounds like bones breaking to your trained ear, the structure flexing in ways that would be fine when complete but risk catastrophe while partially assembled. You walk alongside, calling encouragement while mentally calculating stress factors and failure points. Magnificent, someone shouts, and suddenly the crowd is applauding. The horse does look magnificent, rolling through the workshop courtyard like something from divine stables. The morning sun catches the gilding. The painted wood glows. The obsidian eyes seem to track observers. Despite knowing every hidden beam and false panel, even you feel a moment of awe. The rest of assembly becomes a performance. You're not just building now, but entertaining an audience of warriors who've had little to cheer about for 9 years. Each added section draws appreciative murmurs. The tail, pre-assembled and decorated, attaches with choreographed precision. The decorative elements, shields, offerings, carved prayers, go on like costume jewelry on a deceptive queen. The latter, Agamemnon notes, as workers use one to add upper decorations. Will that travel with the monument? Your mind races. He's thinking about how Trojans will examine it, whether they'll have easy access to the upper sections where your best ventilation hides. No, my lord. Part of the offering's power comes from its completeness. Once finished, it shouldn't be climbed upon like common scaffolding. The Trojans will understand this. Their own monuments follow similar rules. Night falls before you complete the assembly. Agamemnon and most observers have left, but Odysseus remains, watching with those calculating eyes as you add the final touches by torchlight. The last piece is a carved panel that conceals the main entry hatch. It slides into place with a soft click that sounds like fate sealing itself. "It's ready?" Odysseus asks. You walk around the completed horse, checking angles, testing joints, running your hands over surfaces that hide deadly secrets. It's everything you designed and more. A perfect lie wrapped in divine truth. An impossible engineering feat that actually works. A wooden miracle with a belly full of doom. It's ready. The test run turns into a disaster that makes you seriously consider falling on your sword just to avoid the embarrassment. It starts promisingly enough. Odysseus's hand-picked 30 warriors arrive at dawn, grim-faced and battle-ready. These are men who've survived the war's worst fighting, bronze-hard veterans who fear nothing. They look at your wooden horse with professional assessment, checking handholds, testing platforms, examining sight lines. Remember, Diomedes addresses them. Inside, your cargo, no pride, no complaints, just silent breathing and iron discipline. They nod and begin climbing through the hidden hatch with practiced efficiency. You've watched them drill this for days, but seeing it happen in the completed horse makes your chest tight. Each man finds his assigned position, weapons secured, bodies arranged for maximum space efficiency. It's like watching swords being sheathed, if swords could kill you from inside their scabbards. The problems start immediately. With all 30 men inside, the weight distribution you calculated so carefully goes to Hades. The horse lists noticeably to the left, barely visible, but enough that any Trojan inspector would wonder why a divine monument leans like a drunk sailor. Everyone shift right 6 inches, you call through the hidden speaking tube. The movement inside sounds like a landslide in a metal workshop. So much for acoustic dampening. Then someone, you never find out who, accidentally triggers one of the emergency exit panels. It doesn't fully open, just pops loose enough to create a visible gap in what should be solid wood. Pythios scrambles to force it closed, while you distract the watching officers with elaborate explanations about expansion joints for temperature changes. This is a mess, Odysseus says quietly beside you. His calm tone is more terrifying than shouting would be. The movement test proves worse. As the horse rolls forward, pulled by your best crews, the internal problems multiply. Warriors lose balance and crash into each other. Weapons come loose and clatter. Someone's shield breaks free and rolls around like a giant bronze coin, making enough noise to wake Achilles from his eternal rest. Stop, you shout. Just stop. The men inside extract themselves with considerably less dignity than they entered. Several are bleeding from collisions with bronze edges. One warrior emerges holding his helmet, which now has a perfectly horse belly shaped dent. Diomedes comes out last, his expression suggesting he's re-evaluating every life choice that led to this moment. The platforms are too smooth, he reports. When it moves, we slide like fish in oil, and the handholds are at the wrong height for men in armor, adds another warrior. I nearly strangled myself on my own chin strap. The weight distribution, begins a third, but you wave him silent. You know about the weight distribution. The weight distribution haunts your dreams. You spend the rest of the day implementing frantic modifications. Leather strips get nailed to platforms for grip. Handholds are adjusted, added, relocated based on actual warrior feedback rather than theoretical calculations. The weapon's storage system, so elegant in design, gets completely rebuilt after demonstrating its ability to turn loose spears into a lethal internal hedgehog. The second test that evening goes better. The men maintain silence for almost an hour before someone develops a coughing fit that sounds like he's trying to expel his own lungs. The movement phase produces only moderate catastrophe instead of complete disaster. The horse still lists, but subtly enough that you might convince observers it's an artistic choice representing divine movement. But new problems emerge. The ventilation, adequate for stationary concealment, proves insufficient during movement when stress increases breathing rates. Men start gasping like landed fish after just 20 minutes of rolling motion. You drill more holes, disguising them as additional decorative elements, but each modification risks making the deception more obvious. What about water? Asks one warrior after emerging drenched in sweat. 8 hours in there without water. You'd planned for this. Water skins hung at each position, but reality proves your system flawed. The skins make noise when touched. Their weight affects balance, and drinking while maintaining silence is apparently a skill these legendary warriors never acquired. One man demonstrates by accidentally creating a waterfall that soaks 3 companions below him. The third test focuses on emergency scenarios. What if the Trojans decide to burn the horse? Everyone exits in 20 seconds, but it looks like the world's least subtle ambush. So, what if they start poking spears through the decorative holes? The men inside play the world's deadliest game of dodge the bronze point. What if the horse tips over during transport? Everyone dies. You decide not to mention this to the volunteers. Odysseus watches each test with increasing concern. We have 3 days, he reminds you unnecessarily. 3 days before the fleet needs to sail for the deception to work. You don't sleep that night, or the next. Modifications blur together in a haze of exhaustion and sawdust. Every solution creates new problems. Reinforcing the platforms makes them louder. Adding grip makes cleaning up inevitable bodily functions harder. Improving ventilation weakens structural integrity. You're trying to optimize for a dozen variables that all hate each other. The fourth test is almost successful. The men maintain positions for 6 hours, endure movement without major incident, and execute a coordinated exit that actually looks military rather than comedic. You're starting to feel hope when Ajax the Lesser mentions, "Strange how it doesn't smell like horse in here." Of course, you've created a perfect horse sculpture that smells like fresh cut wood, leather, and anxious Greeks. Real horses have a distinct odor that Trojans, who practically worship the animals, will notice is missing. You spend precious hours creating a thoroughly disgusting mixture of actual horse droppings, hay, and sweat to paint on the interior walls. The warriors' expressions as they climb into their now authentic smelling transport are beyond description. The fifth test, what you desperately hope is the final test, happens the night before the scheduled deployment. Everything goes wrong initially. A warrior's spear catches on entry, creating a sound like a bell tower collapsing. Someone mistakes the emergency exit for a handhold and nearly dumps himself out the bottom. The horse develops a mysterious squeak that takes an hour to locate, loose bronze pin fixed with leather wrapping and prayers. But then, miraculously, it all comes together. The men settle into positions with grim efficiency. The horse moves with only acceptable noise. Hours pass in successful concealment. When Diomedes finally emerges after 8 hours inside, he nods once, the professional approval worth more than any praise. "It'll work," he says simply. "Barely, possibly, with luck from every god who still tolerates us, but it'll work." You want to collapse with relief, but there's no time. Final preparations await, last-minute reinforcements, emergency supply checks, one more coat of that horrible horse smell mixture. As dawn approaches, you stand before your creation one last time. It looks magnificent and terrible, a divine offering hiding human cargo like a prayer concealing a curse. "May the gods forgive us," you whisper, not sure if you mean for the deception or the engineering. The morning of abandonment dawns gray and windless, as if the gods themselves hold their breath. You stand on the beach, watching the Greek fleet prepare for its fake retreat, your wooden horse positioned prominently where the Trojans can't possibly miss it. Your hands won't stop shaking, not from fear, but from the surreal culmination of 3 weeks' impossible work about to face its ultimate test. The warriors loom inside for the last time, each movement rehearsed to painful perfection. Odysseus checks them personally, distributing final reminders and whispers that carry more weight than shouts. Remember, you're not warriors until those gates open. Until then, you're mice, silent, still, invisible mice with very sharp teeth. Diomedes goes in last, pausing at the hatch. "If this fails," he tells you quietly, "at least we'll die in the most interesting way possible." The hatch seals with a soft click that echoes in your chest like a tomb closing. From outside, the horse looks perfect, a massive wooden offering to Athena, decorated with gold and prayers, impossible to ignore and harder to refuse. You've added last-minute touches, flowers woven into the mane that coincidentally help mask any human scent, fresh paint on the dedication plaques, even authentic-looking bird droppings on the back to suggest it's been standing here for days rather than hours. "Time to go," Pythios says, tugging your arm. The rest of the army is already boarding ships, making as much noise as possible to ensure Trojan sentries notice the departure. You're supposed to sail with them, your part in this deception complete, but your feet feel rooted to the sand. You take one last walk around your creation, checking for anything that might betray its true nature. The wheels sit properly, ready to roll when Trojans inevitably move it. The decorations gleam convincingly in the morning light. Even knowing every hidden secret, you can almost believe it's just a very large statue. Almost. Sir, a soldier gestures urgently from the last boat. We leave now. But as you turn to go, Odysseus appears at your elbow. Change of plans, he says with that dangerous smile. You're staying with them. He nods toward the horse. Your blood turns to ice water. My lord, I'm an engineer, not a warrior. Exactly. If something goes wrong with your construction, who better to fix it from inside? Besides, his grip on your shoulder is iron. You've earned the right to see your work complete its purpose. There's no arguing with Odysseus when he uses that tone. You find yourself being hustled toward the horse, your protests dying as you realize the terrible logic. You know every joint, every potential failure point. If something breaks during transport, you're the only one who could possibly repair it from inside. It's horrible and sensible, and you want to vomit. The hatch opens briefly, hands pull you inside, and suddenly you're in the belly of your own creation. The darkness is absolute after the morning sun, the smell overwhelming, despite knowing exactly what causes it. Someone, you think it's Ajax, shifts to make room, and his armor scrapes against wood with a sound that makes everyone freeze. Welcome to the crew, Diomedes whispers from somewhere above. Try not to panic. It gets easier after the first hour. It doesn't get easier. As your eyes adjust, you can make out the shapes of warriors frozen in position, each man a statue of potential violence, wrapped in imposed stillness. The sound of your own breathing seems catastrophically loud. How did you ever think this acoustic dampening was sufficient? Outside, the Greek army completes its theatrical withdrawal. Shouts, drum beats, the creak of ships launching, all carefully choreographed to draw Trojan attention. Inside the horse, 31 men breathe in careful unison, a meditation of deception that has to last until when? Hours? Days? The plan has always been vague on timing, dependent on Trojan curiosity and Greek patience. The first test comes sooner than expected. Voices approach, speaking Trojan. Your limited understanding of their language catches words like Greeks, gone, and what is that? Footsteps circle the horse. Hands knock on the lower legs. The sound reverberates through the hollow structure like thunder. Every man inside tenses, weapons gripped but still sheathed. Offering, you make out. Athena, then laughter. Apparently someone made a crude joke about the horse's proportions. More hands touch the wood, testing, exploring. Someone tries to rock it. The wheels creak but hold. You bite your tongue to keep from whimpering when the motion makes the platform sway. Then comes the sound you've dreaded, metal against wood. They're poking it with spears, testing for hollow spaces. A point penetrates near your position, missing your face by inches. letting in a shaft of light that seems bright as the sun. You hear someone outside say something dismissive, and the spear withdraws. The hole remains, a tiny star in your dark universe. More Trojans arrive. The voices multiply, curious, suspicious, argumentative. Someone important appears because the tone changes to respectful reporting. Commands are given. Then comes the rumble and creak of movement. They're bringing equipment to move the horse. Steady, Diomedes breathes, the word barely more than shaped air. This is what we wanted. What follows is the most terrifying transportation of your life. The horse lurches into motion, pulled by what sounds like oxen or horses. The irony isn't lost on you. Every bump in the road threatens to dislodge someone or something. Warriors grip their handholds with desperate strength. You hear someone's breathing getting ragged, panic setting in, but their neighbor places a calming hand on them, and the moment passes. The journey seems eternal. Trojan voices surround the horse, debating, wondering, celebrating their apparent victory. Children run alongside, judging by the high-pitched laughter. Someone throws flowers that land on the horse with soft impacts. It's a triumph parade for your deception, and you're experiencing it from inside the lie. The terrain changes, rougher, then smoother, then an incline. You're approaching the city, climbing the ramp to those famous gates. The wheels protest under the weight and angle, making sounds you desperately hope the Trojans attribute to age rather than overloading. A warrior near you shifts slightly, and his sword hilt knocks against the wall with a clear metallic note. Everyone freezes, but outside the celebration continues. Then comes a moment of pure terror. The horse stops. Voices argue in rapid Trojan. Someone's having second thoughts. You catch words that might mean burn and test, and your mouth goes desert dry. If they decide to set fire to the horse as a precaution, you'll all cook like festival pigs. The emergency exit procedures assume you'll have warning, time to coordinate. A sudden fire would be catastrophe. But then a woman's voice, authoritative and dismissive. The argument ends, movement resumes. And suddenly the acoustic quality changes. You're inside the city. The voices echo differently. The wheels roll on stone instead of earth. Troy has swallowed your wooden lie, and with it, the seeds of its own destruction. The horse stops again, finally positioned somewhere that sounds like a courtyard or plaza. The Trojan voices fade as evening approaches, replaced by only occasional passers-by. Inside, the waiting truly begins. The longest night in human history begins with someone's stomach growling loud enough to wake the dead. In the tomb-like darkness of the horse's belly, the sound might as well be Zeus's thunder. Everyone freezes, then gradually relaxes when no alarm sounds from outside. You're discovering that human bodies make an appalling array of noises when forced into stillness and silence. Hours crawl by like wounded soldiers. You've lost all sense of time. The darkness is absolute, except for tiny pinpricks of light from air holes that show only whether it's day or night. Currently, it's night, which means waiting until the Trojans drink themselves unconscious, celebrating their victory. The feast sounds reaching you are torture, music, laughter, wine jugs clinking. the smell of roasting meat that makes your empty stomach clench. Someone shifts position above you and accidentally kicks your shoulder. The whispered apology is barely audible, but in the silence it feels like shouting. You're developing a new appreciation for how difficult your simple engineering has made survival. Every surface that efficiently distributes weight also efficiently transmits sound. Every handhold that prevents falling also prevents natural movement. You've built a magnificent torture device. Listen, Diomedes breathes, and you strain to hear what his trained senses detect. The celebration is winding down. Voices grow slurred, footsteps stagger, music becomes sporadic. Troy is drinking itself into vulnerability, exactly as Odysseus predicted. Pride and wine, the two most reliable weapons in warfare. But the waiting continues. A drunk Trojan stumbles against the horse, singing something that sounds obscene even without understanding the words. He pounds on the wooden belly, directly where Ajax crouches, laughing at his own joke. The warrior's hand moves infinitesimally toward his sword before discipline reasserts itself. The drunk staggers away, still singing. Your engineering mind won't stop analyzing even in extremis. The ventilation is holding up better than expected. The convection currents you designed actually work, drawing fresh air up through the lower holes and expelling stale air through the main. The platforms distribute weight evenly enough that no one spot bears unbearable pressure. The acoustic dampening performs adequately as long as everyone maintains discipline. Your horse is functioning exactly as designed, which somehow makes the experience worse. You can't blame tools for human suffering. A whispered conversation near the horse makes everyone tense. Two Trojans, not quite drunk enough, discussing whether to post guards. Your limited Trojan catches safe and Greeks gone, and finally, waste of men. They decide the horse can guard itself, being sacred to Athena and all. You breathe again when their voices fade. Midnight must be approaching, or maybe it's only been 2 hours that feel like midnight. Time becomes elastic inside wooden bellies. Someone develops a cramp and has to suffer in absolute silence. Another warrior starts breathing too fast, the edge of panic, before his neighbor grips his shoulder in reminder. You're watching elite warriors reduced to their base humanity, and it's both humbling and terrifying. Then comes the worst sound possible: rain. It starts as gentle drops that might be ignored, but builds to a steady patter that drums on the horse's wooden skin. Your weatherproofing holds. Pine pitch and overlapping planks keep the interior dry, but rain means Trojans seeking shelter, possibly near the horse. It also means slippery conditions when the time comes to exit and fight. A new voice outside, clear and authoritative despite the late hour. Guards are being posted after all, someone in authority showing unfortunate initiative. Footsteps circle the horse with professional thoroughness. A spear shaft raps against the legs, testing. The sound reverberates through the hollow space like a drum call, but the guards seem satisfied. They take positions you can hear but not see, their occasional conversation marking their locations. Inside, the situation deteriorates. The rain covers small sounds, but also drops the temperature. Muscles already cramped from stillness now shiver with cold. The horse's interior, designed for concealment, not comfort, becomes a misery of aching joints and suppressed suffering. You feel the man next to you trembling, whether from cold or stress is unclear. The rain intensifies, becoming a deluge that sounds like river stones pouring onto the horse. Lightning flashes, visible through the air holes as stuttering brightness. Thunder follows, masking all other sounds. In any other circumstance, warriors might welcome a storm as cover for movement. Trapped inside a wooden statue, it's one more layer of helplessness. The wood is swelling. You whisper to Diomedes during a particularly loud thunder crash. It's true. The rain is making the carefully fitted joints expand. The hidden doors, designed with precise tolerances, might stick when the critical moment arrives. Your engineering triumph could become a death trap through simple weather. He grips your shoulder, understanding, acknowledgement, and order to stay silent, all in one gesture. Nothing can be done now except endure and hope. The modifications needed to prevent weather-related swelling would have been obvious, defeating the deception. You chose concealment over reliability, and now everyone pays the price. The storm passes, but leaves its mark. The guards sound miserable, complaining in voices that carry clearly about wet armor and ruined watch schedules. One mentions that the wine has run out, Troy's celebration, exhausting even their legendary stores. This is good news delivered through chattering teeth. Drunk Trojans were always part of the plan. Hours later, it must be hours. Though time has lost meaning, the city finally quiets. Guard conversations become intermittent mumbles. The rain reduces to drizzle, then stops. In the distance, a dog barks once and goes silent. Troy sleeps, wine-sick and storm-washed, around the wooden miracle it welcomed inside. Soon, Diomedes breathes, the word carrying layers of meaning. Soon the signal, soon the action, soon the end of this wooden nightmare, one way or another. But not yet. The darkness persists. The silence demands continuation. The wooden belly holds its human secret like a grotesque pregnancy waiting to birth violence. You've helped create this moment, designed it, built it, tested it. Now you must endure it with the others. Engineer, become unwilling warrior in the belly of your own beast. A rat scurries across someone's foot. The warrior doesn't even flinch. That's when you know these men have transcended normal human limits. They've become what your horse demanded, not just hidden, but transformed. Patience incarnate with swords. The longest night continues its crawl toward a dawn that will end an empire. The signal comes as distant fire, a flame arrow arcing over Troy's walls from the Greek fleet that has crept back under cover of darkness. Through the tiny air holes, you glimpse its reflection on wet stone, a falling star marking the death of an age. Inside the horse, 31 men transform from statues back into instruments of war with terrifying efficiency. Now, Diomedes commands, and the word releases hours of compressed energy. The main hatch resists, swollen as you feared from the rain. For a heart-stopping moment, your entire engineering triumph threatens to become history's most elaborate tomb. Then Ajax and another warrior apply coordinated pressure, and the wood gives with a crack that sounds like thunder but draws no response from the wine-dulled guards. Warriors drop from the belly like deadly rain, each man rolling to absorb impact and coming up with weapons ready. You tumble out last, legs numb from hours of stillness, and nearly impale yourself on someone's spear. The courtyard spins as blood returns to compressed limbs. Around you, Greece's finest are already moving, shadows with bronze teeth spreading through sleeping Troy. The guards die silently, wine and surprise making them easy prey. You watch, feeling useless with your engineer's hands, while warriors do what warriors do best. But then Odysseus grabs your shoulder. When did he appear? And points to the gates. You know construction. You know how to deconstruct. Those bars need to move. Of course, the gates of Troy, those legendary barriers that held off Greece for 9 years, need to open for the army waiting outside. You stumble toward them on legs that barely remember walking, your mind shifting from survival back to problem solving. The bar system is sophisticated, multiple beams, counterweights, a puzzle of wood and bronze that would challenge you fresh. Exhausted and shaking, it seems impossible, but impossible is what you've been doing for 3 weeks. You study the mechanism by flickering torchlight while screams begin echoing through the city. The warriors have reached the palace. Troy is waking to its nightmare, but slowly, too slowly to matter. Your hands find the critical pins, the weight distributions you understand instinctively. Help me here, you gasp to a warrior whose name you never learned. Together you lever the first beam up and out. It falls with a crash that brings shouts from nearby houses, but the second beam is already moving. The gate mechanism, built to resist assault from outside, never anticipated attack from within, like the horse itself. Troy's defenses were designed for the wrong threat. The gates swing open just as the first Trojan soldiers arrive. Half-dressed and wholly unprepared, they face not just the 31 who emerged from the horse, but the entire Greek army pouring through the entrance you've unlocked. The slaughter that follows makes you turn away, focusing on the horse that stands abandoned in the courtyard like a confession. Fire spreads through the city with hungry enthusiasm. The wooden horse, your masterwork of deception, catches flame from a dropped torch. You watch the carefully shaped timbers char and collapse, 3 weeks of impossible engineering becoming ash and memory. Part of you wants to weep for the craftsmanship lost. Most of you is simply grateful to never see the inside of that belly again. Dawn breaks red through smoke to find Troy dying. The city that stood unconquered for 9 years falls in a single night to your wooden lie. Warriors clap your back, calling you hero, genius, the man who built victory. But watching refugees stream past, children crying, women screaming, old men stumbling in shock, you feel only hollow. Engineering is supposed to build, not unmake civilizations. Odysseus finds you sitting by the burning remains of the horse, staring at the warped metal fittings that once held such precise joints. Regrets? He asks. I was just thinking, you reply slowly, about the weight distribution. If I'd calculated for rain-swollen wood from the start, that hatch would have opened easier. He laughs, short and sharp, already improving on perfection. That's why you're the engineer. He pauses, watching Troy burn. They'll remember this forever. You know, the horse, the trick, the fall. But not the builder, you say, and find you prefer it that way. Let Homer sing of heroes and kings. You want only to forget the sound of 30 men breathing in darkness, the feel of destiny balanced on wheel axles you designed, the knowledge that your greatest work was built to die. The aftermath blurs, ships loaded with plunder, arguments over spoils, the beginning of journeys home that will spawn their own legends. You sail with the others, richer in gold but poorer in spirit, carrying blueprints in your head for things you'll never build. Who would commission another such horse? Who would need one in a world where Troy has already fallen? Years later, in a workshop that smells of honest sawdust and simple construction, you'll sometimes pause mid-calculation. Your apprentices will wonder why you insist on over-engineering everything, why you build furniture that could withstand siege warfare. You'll tell them it's simply good practice, but really you're still compensating for those moments in the dark when you wondered if your joints would hold, if your math was right, if your impossible wooden horse would last long enough to end a war. History will remember the heroes who emerged from the belly of deception. Poets will sing of Odysseus's cunning, Diomedes's courage, Ajax's strength. The horse itself becomes legend, simplified to symbol, its construction attributed to divine inspiration rather than desperate innovation. But on sleepless nights, you remember every beam, every joint, every precisely calculated curve. You remember the weight of warriors balanced on platforms you designed, the whisper of air through holes you carved, the way lamplight looked from inside as Troy celebrated its doom. You remember building something perfect and terrible, a machine for ending stories that couldn't be unmade once made. The Trojan horse was your masterpiece. You spent the rest of your life building things to forget it, simple and honest constructions that sheltered rather than deceived. But in your dreams, you're always inside that wooden belly again, waiting in the dark with 30 warriors and the terrible knowledge that your calculations were correct. The horse holds, the city falls. The engineer endures to build another day, carrying the weight of what hands can create when guided by desperate cleverness. The soft background hum continues steadily. The story's rhythm has slowed, words spacing themselves like tired footsteps heading home. Somewhere, a listener's breathing has deepened into the edge of sleep, carried there by tales of ancient engineering and impossible achievements. The night wraps around the ending like a comfortable blanket, all sharp edges worn smooth by drowsy telling. Troy has fallen, the horse has burned, the engineer has sailed away to simpler constructions. History becomes bedtime story, becomes gentle darkness. Sweet dreams wait beyond the wooden walls of waking, where no calculations are needed and no wars require winning. Rest now. The story is complete. The journey ended. The impossible made possible, and then left behind in favor of peaceful sleep.